The living room was warm and full of noise. Soft music played in the background while family members laughed, talked, and moved around the room. It was a small gathering, nothing fancy. Just one of those evenings where everyone feels relaxed and close. She stood near the doorway, holding a glass of water, watching everyone else enjoy themselves. Her posture was calm, her smile gentle. She did not rush. She never did anymore. Age had taught her patience. Her granddaughter was in the center of the room, laughing loudly with friends. Young, confident, full of energy. The music grew louder, and a few people began to dance. Nothing serious, just playful movements, teasing steps, and careless joy. For a brief moment, the older woman felt something familiar stir inside her. Her foot tapped softly against the floor. Her shoulders shifted slightly, almost without thinking. It was instinct, the kind that never really disappears. She took one small step forward. That was when her granddaughter noticed. With a half laugh and a careless tone, she said, "You're too old to dance. You might hurt yourself." The words were not cruel on purpose. They were said quickly, without thought. But once spoken, they hung in the air longer than expected. The laughter slowed. Someone cleared their throat. The music kept playing, but something had changed. The older woman stopped moving. She looked at her granddaughter and smiled. Not a forced smile, not an angry one. Just calm. She nodded once, stepped back, and returned to her seat. No argument. No explanation. No defense. To everyone else, it seemed like nothing. Just a moment that passed. But inside her chest, something tightened. She had lived long enough to know that silence often hurts more than insults. Later that night, after the guests had left and the house grew quiet, she sat alone in her bedroom. The walls were plain, the air still. She removed her earrings slowly, placing them on the dresser like she had done for years. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror, silver hair, fine lines, steady eyes. She did not look angry. She looked thoughtful. She opened her closet and pulled out a small box from the back shelf. It was old, the edges worn, the lid slightly loose. She sat on the bed and opened it carefully. Inside were things no one ever asked about. A faded photograph, a pair of worn dance shoes, and a medal, dull from time. Her fingers hovered over the medal. She didn't pick it up right away. She just looked at it, breathing slowly, as if remembering something far away but still alive. She closed the box and rested it on her lap. For decades, she had carried this part of herself quietly, not because she was ashamed, but because life moved on. Responsibilities came first, then time, then age. No one ever asked who she used to be, and she never volunteered the answer. Down the hall, her granddaughter laughed while scrolling on her phone, unaware of the weight of her words. The older woman stood and placed the box back where it belonged. She turned off the light and lay down, staring at the ceiling. She did not cry. She did not feel angry, but a decision had quietly begun to form. Not to prove anyone wrong, not to make a point, but to remind herself of something she had never truly lost. As she closed her eyes, one thought passed gently through her mind. Some things don't disappear just because people stop seeing them. And in that quiet room, with the house asleep around her, the story truly began. Morning came quietly. Sunlight slipped through the curtains and rested on the floor like it always did. The house was still. The older woman woke before anyone else, as she had for years. Her body felt stiff, but her mind was awake. She sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, listening to the sounds of the house. A distant car passing. A bird outside the window. Ordinary sounds. Yet something inside her felt different. The box in the closet crossed her mind again. Later that morning, while the rest of the family slept in, she brewed herself a cup of tea and sat by the window. Her hands wrapped around the warm mug. As the steam rose, memories followed. There was a time when her days began before sunrise, just like this, but for a different reason. Back then, she practiced in small rooms with hard floors and worn mirrors. Nothing fancy, no bright lights, no cheering crowds, just discipline, sweat, and the sound of music playing over and over again until her feet ached. She had not started dancing to be noticed. She danced because it made sense to her. Because when she moved, the world felt quiet and clear. In those years, life was not easy. Money was tight. Support was limited. There were people who told her dancing was not practical, not serious, not worth chasing. But she trained anyway. She trained after work. She trained when she was tired. She trained when no one was watching. Slowly, People began to notice. Not because she talked about herself, but because her movement spoke for her. There was control in the way she stepped, purpose in the way she turned. She didn't rush. She didn't waste motion. One competition led to another. Small stages at first, then larger ones. Crowded rooms, stronger pressure. She learned how to breathe through nerves, how to trust her body even when fear crept in. There was one performance she remembered clearly. The music started and everything else disappeared. No crowd, no judges, just rhythm and movement working together like they always had. That night changed her life. She didn't win fame. She didn't become rich. But she earned something deeper, confidence that stayed with her long after the applause faded. Then life, as it often does, shifted. Responsibilities arrived. Work became necessary. Family needed her. Time became limited. Dance slowly moved to the background, not because she stopped loving it, but because other things demanded space. She didn't complain. She adapted. Years passed. Then more years. People around her began to see her differently, as someone older, quieter, slower. And she allowed it. Not because it was true, but because it was easier than correcting them. She never mentioned the competitions, never talked about the medal, never explained the shoes hidden in the closet. Back in the present, she finished her tea and stood slowly. Her joints protested slightly. She stretched carefully, the way she had learned long ago. Her granddaughter walked into the kitchen, still half asleep. She greeted her kindly, as always. Nothing felt awkward. The moment from the night before seemed forgotten, at least by one of them. But inside the older woman, something steady had returned. Later that afternoon, when the house was empty, she closed the living room curtains and stood in the center of the floor. No audience, no mirror, just silence. She placed one foot forward. Her body hesitated at first. Then memory took over. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but enough. Her arms lifted slightly. Her weight shifted. The movement was slower now, careful, but it was hers. She stopped and laughed softly to herself. Not in embarrassment, in surprise. She was still there. That evening, she found a small community flyer on the table, an announcement for a local event. Open performances, music, a simple stage. She read it once, then again. She folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket without telling anyone. She did not know yet what she would do, but for the first time in years, she was listening to a part of herself she had ignored for too long. And deep down, she knew this story was no longer about the past. It was about what still remained. The flyer stayed folded in her pocket for 2 days. She felt it there every time she moved, like a quiet reminder. She did not rush to make a decision. She had learned long ago that important choices should be allowed to breathe. On the third morning, the house was empty again. Her granddaughter had gone out early, and the silence felt heavier than usual. The older woman stood in the living room, staring at the floor. She unfolded the flyer and read it slowly. A local community event. Open performances. Music, dance, spoken word. All ages welcome. She smiled faintly at those last words. Still, doubt followed quickly behind. Her body was not the same. Her balance was slower. Some movements felt stiff. She knew that. She was not chasing youth. She was chasing truth. That afternoon, she decided to practice again, properly this time. She closed the curtains, turned the music low, and removed her shoes. The floor felt cool beneath her feet. She stood still for a long moment, breathing, listening to her heart. The first steps were careful. She did not push. She did not rush. Each movement was tested, adjusted, respected. Her body protested in small ways, a tight knee, a sore ankle, but she listened and adapted. This was not about perfection. It was about remembering. Some days were harder than others. One morning she stopped after only a few minutes, frustrated and tired. She sat down, hands resting on her knees, wondering if she was being unrealistic. But then there were days when something clicked. Her body moved with a quiet confidence that surprised her. Not fast, not flashy, just controlled, intentional. She began practicing every day when the house was empty. Always alone, always quietly. She did not tell her granddaughter. Not because she was afraid of her reaction, but because she needed this to remain hers. No opinions, no comments, no pressure. As the days passed, she adjusted her routine. She shortened movements, simplified steps, removed anything that felt forced. What remained was clean and honest. At night, When her granddaughter laughed in the other room or watched videos on her phone, the older woman sat with her thoughts. She remembered all the times she had stayed quiet in her life, the times she had stepped back to make others comfortable, the moments when she let people assume things about her because correcting them felt unnecessary. She had never been invisible. She had simply chosen peace over explanation. But this time felt different. One evening, as she practiced, she nearly lost her balance during a turn. Her foot slipped, and she reached out quickly, catching herself on the table. Her heart raced. She stood there, breathing hard, her hand trembling slightly. For a moment, fear crept in. "This is foolish," she whispered to herself. But then she remembered the look on her granddaughter's face the night she had been told she was too old to dance. Not cruel, just unaware. She steadied herself and tried again, slower, smaller, safer. That night, she sat at the kitchen table and marked the date of the event on the calendar. No announcement, no dramatic decision, just a quiet circle around the day. As the date approached, her routine became more focused. She practiced timing. She practiced breathing. She practiced stopping, knowing when to end with strength rather than exhaustion. She chose music that meant something to her. Not loud, not trendy, something steady, something with space to move and feel. 2 days before the event, her granddaughter noticed her moving differently. "You okay?" she asked casually. "I'm fine," the older woman replied, smiling. And she was. The night before the performance, she opened the closet again and took out the old dance shoes. She didn't wear them. She just cleaned them carefully and placed them back. In the morning, she dressed simply and comfortably. No costume, no attempt to impress, just herself. As she left the house, she paused at the door, took a breath, and stepped outside. She still didn't know how it would end, but she knew one thing for certain. She was done hiding. The community hall was smaller than she expected. Rows of folding chairs filled the room, and a low stage stood at the front. The lights were simple. No spotlight, no curtain, just enough brightness for people to see who was performing. She arrived early, as she always did for important moments. The room smelled faintly of wood and dust, the kind of place where many stories had already passed through without being remembered. People chatted casually as they entered. Some performers stretched quietly near the stage. Others laughed nervously. There was no competition in the air, just anticipation. Her granddaughter arrived a little later, distracted and unaware. She had only come to support a friend who was performing. She didn't even glance at the list of names. The older woman sat in the back row, hands folded in her lap, breathing slowly. Her name was written near the bottom of the program. She watched performance after performance. A young singer with a shaky voice. A pair of children dancing without rhythm, but full of joy. A man reciting a poem he barely remembered. Each performance was met with polite applause. No judgment, no pressure. As her turn approached, she felt her chest tighten. Not with fear, but awareness. Her name was called. There was a small pause. A few people turned to look. Some searched the room, surprised. Others smiled kindly, assuming this would be short and simple. Her granddaughter looked up, confused. She stood carefully and walked toward the stage. Her steps were steady. Her back was straight. She did not rush. When she reached the center of the stage, she paused. For a moment, she saw only faces. Curious, neutral, uncertain. Then the music began. It was soft at first, measured, familiar. She closed her eyes briefly and breathed in. Her first movement was slow and controlled. One step, then another. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. A few people shifted in their seats. Then something changed. Her posture lifted. Her arms moved with purpose. Her feet found rhythm that felt natural, not forced. She was not trying to impress. She was remembering. The room grew quiet. The way she moved was different from the others. There was intention in every motion. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was rushed. Her granddaughter leaned forward without realizing it. She recognized something she had never seen before, confidence without noise. As the music built, her movements expanded. Still careful, still respectful of her body, but filled with strength that did not need speed to be powerful. People stopped whispering. Phones lowered. Eyes stayed fixed on the stage. When she turned, her balance held. When she paused, it felt deliberate. When she finished a sequence, she did not smile. She breathed. This was not a performance of youth. It was mastery. As the final notes played, she slowed, grounding herself, ending exactly where she had begun. Stillness. The music faded. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then the applause came, not loud at first, but growing. Stronger. Real. Her granddaughter remained seated, frozen. Her mouth was slightly open. Her hands rested in her lap. She had never imagined this version of her grandmother. The older woman bowed her head gently and stepped off the stage. Her hands trembled slightly now, not from fear, but from release. Back in her seat, she closed her eyes and exhaled. She had done what she came to do. Nothing more, nothing less. And in that quiet room, surrounded by strangers, something invisible shifted, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. The applause faded slowly, like a wave pulling back from the shore. People stood up, some smiling, others shaking their heads in quiet disbelief. There was no cheering, no shouting, just a deep, respectful response that filled the room. The kind of reaction that comes when people realize they've witnessed something real. The older woman stayed seated for a moment, letting her breathing return to normal. Her heart was still beating fast, but her body felt steady. She didn't look around. She didn't search for approval. She had already received what she needed. Her granddaughter remained in her chair, unmoving. The noise around her felt distant. She replayed the performance in her mind, the control, the calm, the strength. Nothing about it matched the image she had carried for so long. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a hobby. This was something earned. When the event ended, people slowly began to leave. Some nodded respectfully as they passed the older woman. A few stopped to say simple things. That was beautiful. I didn't expect that. You moved with so much control. She thanked them politely, her voice calm. Compliments had never been what drove her. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. Streetlights reflected softly on the pavement. She walked toward the car alone, her steps slow but steady. Her granddaughter followed a few moments later. They stood side by side without speaking. Finally, her granddaughter broke the silence. I didn't know, she said quietly. The words were not rushed. There was no joke in her voice. No defense. Just honesty. The older woman looked at her, not surprised. You didn't ask, she replied gently. And I didn't feel the need to explain. Her granddaughter swallowed. Her eyes dropped to the ground. I thought, she began, then stopped. She took a breath. I thought age meant you couldn't do things like that anymore. The older woman nodded slowly. A lot of people think that, she said. Sometimes we start thinking it too. They stood there for a moment, the night air settling around them. I didn't mean to hurt you, her granddaughter said. I just didn't understand. I know, the older woman replied. That's why I stayed quiet. The words carried no bitterness. No lecture, just truth. On the drive home, neither of them spoke much. The silence felt different now, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. At home, the granddaughter helped her grandmother up the steps without being asked. She moved carefully, attentively, not out of fear, but respect. Later that night, the older woman returned to her room and opened the closet once more. She took out the box and placed it on the bed. This time, she opened it fully. She picked up the metal and held it in her palm. The metal was cool, heavier than it looked. She traced its edges slowly, remembering how hard she had worked for it, and how quietly she had carried it all these years. She did not feel the need to put it on display. Instead, she placed it back inside the box, alongside the shoes and photographs, and closed the lid gently. In the hallway, her granddaughter paused outside the door, then knocked softly. Can I come in? She asked. The older woman nodded. Her granddaughter sat on the edge of the bed. I won't ever say something like that again, she said. About you being too old. The older woman smiled, not triumphantly, but kindly. This was never about age, she said. It was about listening. Her granddaughter nodded, understanding more than she ever had before. That night, as the house grew quiet, something had changed, not just between them, but within both of them. Respect had replaced assumption, and silence had finally been heard. The days after the performance passed quietly. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden changes. No long conversations. And yet, everything felt different. The older woman returned to her usual routine. Morning tea by the window, slow walks through the house, careful movements that respected her body. From the outside, nothing had changed. But inside, something had settled. She felt lighter. Not because she had proven anything, but because she no longer carried something unspoken. Her granddaughter, on the other hand, was noticeably different. She listened more. She asked questions she had never thought to ask before. Small ones at first. How long did you dance back then? Did you ever get nervous? Did you miss it? The older woman answered calmly, without exaggeration. She didn't relive the past, she shared it. Sometimes they sat together, looking through the old photographs. The granddaughter studied them carefully, seeing her grandmother not as fragile or limited, but as someone who had lived fully long before she was born. One afternoon, her granddaughter asked, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" The older woman thought for a moment. "Because I didn't think I needed to," she said. "And because people don't always listen until they're ready." Her granddaughter nodded slowly. That answer stayed with her. Weeks passed. Life continued. But respect had taken root. The older woman no longer practiced every day. She didn't feel the need to. The performance had done its work, not on the audience, but on herself. One evening, she took the box from the closet and moved it to a lower shelf. Not hidden, not displayed, just accessible. Later that night, her granddaughter noticed it. "What's in there?" she asked gently. The older woman smiled. "A reminder," she said. "Not of who I was, of who I still am." Her granddaughter smiled back. From that day on, there were small changes. Music played more often in the house. Sometimes the granddaughter would ask her to show a step. Sometimes they laughed when it didn't go right. Sometimes they just moved slowly together in the living room. No audience, no expectations. There was no talk of being too old, only being present. The older woman never returned to the stage. She didn't need to. That chapter had closed peacefully. But the lesson remained. Age had taken some things from her: speed, strength, ease. But it had not taken her discipline. It had not taken her identity. And it had not taken her voice. The granddaughter carried that lesson forward, even outside the house. She caught herself before making assumptions. She listened more closely. She noticed the quiet strength in people she might have overlooked before. One night, as they sat together watching television, her granddaughter rested her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "I'm glad you danced," she said. The older woman smiled, her eyes on the screen. "So am I," she replied. Not because she was seen, but because she remembered herself. And that was enough.